In this video, we will explore the syntax of SwiftUI. In SwiftUI, everything is a view, as we've discussed in a previous video. But what is a view in SwiftUI? A view is a struct that conforms to the view protocol. Let's unpack that a little bit. What is a struct? Structs and also classes are structures of code that can be used to store values and define functions, among other things. When you first create a new project, you're given this boilerplate code with two structs. This struct below is how you define the preview shown on the right. This is optional, and this struct only exists to give you the preview that's shown on the right. But notice that the view that is being previewed is simply the content view that is defined above. And this is how to create a new instance of the struct by adding the parentheses after the struct name here. So that's a brief review of structs. What about protocols? Well, a protocol is like a blueprint or a pattern that simply tells structs and classes what they need to do a certain job. So if the struct doesn't have all the right requirements of the protocol, then it will just give you an error. And if you're familiar with Java, a protocol is similar to an interface. So here, the struct content view is using the protocol view, which says that it needs just one property, and that is the body property. In other programming languages, properties like this can have getters and setters. And in SwiftUI, you could write the code like this with a get and return syntax, and it will work just fine. And perhaps this is more familiar to you if you've worked with other programming languages. But in SwiftUI, this syntax is optional, so we can remove it. Well, what about this sum keyword here? This is technically called an opaque type, and if you're interested in learning more, I recommend that you check out the Swift programming language documentation. But for now, all you need to know is that you can only return one view. And let's switch over to Xcode now for just a quick example of what we've been talking about so far. So this is the boilerplate code that you get when you first start a new project. And let's just talk a little bit about that get and return syntax. So I could write this like this with a return statement here and resume, and it will compile just fine, no errors. So you don't have to have these. I'll remove these. And when I say that the body property needs this sum view here in order to conform to the view protocol, this sum keyword just means that I can only return one view. So I can't do something like this, for example. That would give me an error. I could get around this by putting it inside of another container view, as we've discussed in a previous video as well. But in this case, I just want to show that you can only return one view. That's what the sum keyword means, more or less. But for any view that you return, you also can only return one type. So this is a little bit more tricky. Let me kind of show you what I mean. So let's say I have a variable here, and this variable is black equals true, just a Boolean right here. Well, I can put an if statement inside of my body like this. Is black. And if it's true, it will return this view here. Okay. But if it's false, we can say, I want to return something else. So let's say here that if it is black, it will say black. And if it is not black, then it will say not black. Something like that. So let's resume. And it looks at this variable up here, and if it is true, then it will return black, and if this is false, of course it will return not black. So everything's working. That's great. But what if I had something like this? Let's say I returned a view that was a color like this. Well, in this case here, this view is different from this type of view here, and so it's going to give me an error just like that. So all this means is that you can only return one view And for any view that you do return, it has to all be of the same type, just like I spoke about here. So let's fix this again. Text black, and this will build just fine.